in the Sicha, in Parshas Kedoshim, Sicha Aleph. So the Rebbe speaks about the Mishnah in the end of Mesechus Sanhedrin. The Mishnah speaks about the dinim of Irani Dachas, and amongst the various dinim, at the end it says the din of Lo Yidbak B'yodcha Me'uma Min Acherim. And after that it says Shekol Zman Sharishoim Ba'elam Charein Af Ba'elam. And this the Gemara says, Man Rishoim. The Gemara says, who's the Rishoim that the Mishnah is referring to? So it says, Omar Rabbi Yosef Ganvi. Rabbi Yosef says this refers to the Ganovim. And the Rebbe brings from the Mefarshim that explain that the Chiddush of Rabbi Yosef Ganvi is that the Rishoim that the Mishnah is referring to is not the Rishoim of the Irani Dachas, because they're not around anymore, even though that's the mashmas of the Lashon, especially according to our Girsa, Shek calls man Sharasham Be'elam. But it's referring to the Ganvi who were over on Lo Yidbak B'yadcha Me'uma Min Acherim, that they bring the Charein Af Ba'elam. And the Rebbe, after a number of diyukim, the Rebbe explains the Vart and the Chiddush of Rabbi Yosef based on a few Yeseides. The Yeseides are, number one, the Mishnah speaking about Charein Af, as opposed to the Braisa that speaks about Charein, that Charein Af is something that's connected to Avodah Zarah. Furthermore, the Mishnah says, Kol Zman Sharashayim Ba'elam, that this Avodah Zarah, this Aveira of Avodah Zarah is something that's nimshach, that's continues. And on that, Rabbi Yosef says, how does the Aveira of Avodah Zarah continue through Ganvi when the Aveira of Avodah Zarah was done in a way of Ganvi, through being over on Lo Yidbak B'yadcha Me'uma Min Acherim. So, the first Yesod that Charein Af, that says in the Mishnah, is connected specifically with the Aveira of Avodah Zarah. And that's why the Mishnah says Charein Af, as opposed to the Braisa that's speaking about all Aveira, says just Charein, Val der Bite Losh, Val der Bite Charein Af, gefind men Dafke B'Sheichus Avodah Zarah. The Rebbe brings this from the Rambam, wie the Rambam sagt. He brings this is all, this Yesodistic inyan in the Sicha is based on the Rambam in Meir Nevuchim. That the Rambam in Meir Nevuchim, Chelek Aleph, Perek Lamed Vav, says that Charein Af is connected with Avodah Zarah. In the Hemshech of the same Ois in the Sicha, where the Rebbe asks the question, the Rebbe says, Mela, in the Mishnah we could understand why Kol Zman Sharasham Ba'elam, why even after the Aveira was completed, there's still Charein Af, because the Avodah Zarah is connected with Charein Af. Mashaik in the Braisa, why is the Charein Af continuous? So the Rebbe brings there that in the Mishnah it's understood Valdor Retzach B'Sheichus Su Avodah Zarah. Und Kolzman says da Metzias von Avodah Zarah Cherem is Eich Faran Charein Af. Und wie es steht in Sifri, the Rebbe brings this from a Sifri, Kolzman Sh'Avodah Zarah Ba'elam Charein Af Ba'elam. So, what's the difference between what the Rebbe is bringing from a Sifri and a Beferish Rashi, Alatera, and this Yesod, this Chiddush that connects Charein Af with Avodah Zarah that the Rebbe brings dafka from the Rambam in Meir Nevuchim? So the difference, L'chayre Pashat, in the Sifri, it says, Kol Zman Sh'Avodah Zarah Ba'elam Charein Af Ba'elam. The Charein Af is connected with the Metzias of Avodah Zarah. At that point, where we still think that the Mishnah could be talking about the Rishoim, Arba Elam, and the Avodah Zarah that they served, that they made into Avodah Zarah still around, so then we could say, we could understand why the Charein is Af is Ba'elam based on the Sifri, because the Metzias of Avodah Zarah leads to Charein Af. However, in the Hemshech of the Sicha, the whole Chiddush of the Sicha is even after the Avodah Zarah is not around anymore, there's still a Charein Af. The Charein Af is mitzad the Chet of Avodah Zarah. And that's what the Rebbe brings from the Meir Nevuchim, that the Chet of Avodah Zarah, even when there isn't anymore a Metzias of Avodah Zarah, is also connected with Charein Af. And that's why in the whole Sicha, this Yesod of Charein Af as a mistake, as an outcome of the Aveira of Avodah Zarah, even without any remnant of the Metzias of the Chefza of Avodah Zarah, that's based on the Meir Nevuchim. Just interestingly, so in this Ha'ara 30, so the Rebbe says Meir Nevuchim, or Ei Mefarshe Meir Nevuchim Sham, ובכל אופן מובן כאן שהרי הפרשה מדברת בעיר הנידח אז חטא עבודה זרה. I'm not sure what would be the Mefarshe HaMeir Nevuchim and how many Mefarshe Meir Nevuchim there are. So possibly what this refers to is in Tzafnas Paneach Ala Teira on Devarim. At the end of Devarim, there's the Pirushim of the Tzafnas Paneach on Meir Nevuchim. In the Sefer, it's on page Shin Samach Aleph. There's the Rogatchover stellt sich on this Meir Nevuchim in Perek Lamed Vav, where he says Le Simsa Loshen Chareinav Ela Bavei Zara Bilvat, and he brings from a Pirush on the Meir Nevuchim Narvaini. I think it was Rab Moshe Narvaini. The Pirush Narvaini brings Rabim Shalu al Omrei Vayichar Af Hashem Bom Vayelach. And also they ask from a pasuk in Eiv Chora Api B'cho V'Shnei Reyacha. So this Pirush of Moshe Narvaini tries to explain the difference and why those psukim are not a stira to the klal of the Rambam, why there's certain types of psukim where it could say Chareinav even not by Avodah Zarah. The Rogatchover here argues on him, he calls it Medaber Dvarim B'Telem, and he says it depends if the Torah says there will be a Chareinav, or the Torah just says what happened that the Eibishter had a Chareinav. Whatever is the exact machlekes, but they have a machlekes when there could be Chareinav, not by Avodah Zarah, despite the klal of the Rambam. So very possibly, good assumption that the Rebbe is referring, when he says the Mefarshe Meir Nevuchim, he's referring to the Narvaini and the Tzafnas Paneach and the Rogatchover, and maybe other Mefarshim discuss the same shaila of seemingly other psukim where we have the Lashon Chareinav not by Chet Avodah Zarah, and they have others, I guess, different days. There's a kapanim clearly, seemingly a machlekes between the Rogatchover and Rab Moshe Narvaini. What is the rule when it could be Lashon Chareinav even not by Chet Avodah Zarah? And that would explain the conclusion of this Ha'ara, B'chalef and moving kan, regardless of what shita you're going to follow about when there could be an exception to this rule, but Akapanim over here where we're talking about Chet Avodah Zarah, here for sure fits the Lashon Chareinav, and that's explaining what the Rebbe said in the Pnim, why in the Mishnah Davka, as opposed to the Brais says the Lashon Chareinav, because we're talking about the Aveira of Avodah Zarah. So, we're talking about the Aveira of Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah brings Chareinav. However, the Lashon is Kolzman Sharishayim Ba'elam, even when the Aveira is not around anymore, says the Rebbe in Sifei. And to explain how come there's a Chareinav from the Aveira of Avodah Zarah, even when there's no Metzias, that means there's some case where the Aveda of Avodah Zarah is ongoing. It's nimshach. Even though the Metzias of Avodah Zarah is not there, to answer that, Rabbi Yosef says Ganvi. And this is the Metzias, the Nekuda of the beer of the Sicha. Because Ganvi, the Aveira of Gneva, the Rebbe brings from the Rogatchover, is Apula Nimshachas. And therefore, if the Aveira of Gneva, every Aveira of Gneva or Gzela is Apula Nimshachas, but when the Aveira of Gneva or Gzela is connected with Avodah Zarah, so that's the Hechetimsa of how the Avodah Zarah, the Aveira of Avodah Zarah could be Nimshach. In our case, someone who was over on Lo Yidbak B'yad Chamuma Min Acherim, so he's doing the Aveira of Avodah Zarah. That's what brings the Chareinav. But the way that he's being over on Avodah Zarah is with the specific Isra of Lo Yidbak B'yad Chamuma Min Acherim. He's stealing from the Cherem. That's not the main Aveira. Like the Rebbe brought in the Ha'aretz, it's a question even if it's possible to have Gneva by Yisuri Hana. But since we say that it could be, so if he's able to have Gneva, so the Gneva aspect of the Aveira is a pula nimshachas. So that's a pula nimshachas in the aveira of avodah zarah, because what he stole by doing this gneva, he's doing avodah zarah. And therefore the chet of avodah zarah is considered to be nimshach, and as long as the Rishaim who was over on this chet of avodah zarah is ba'elam, he drags on, he continues the charein ba'elam. Before we get to the beer and the sich of why Geneva is a pul nimshachas, so just to point out, so there's a chiddush over here. Geneva is a pul nimshachas. La yidbak biyadcha mu'uma min acherem. L'cheira is not a pul nimshachas. But when the way he was over on la yidbak biyadcha mu'uma min acherem was through an aveira of Geneva, since the Geneva was nimshach, and the Geneva is here affiliated, it's connected with the Chet of Avodah Zarah, so that causes that the Chet of Avodah Zarah should be ongoing, and that Kol Zman Sharisham Ba'elam Charein Av Ba'elam. So that's the chiddush, that even though the Avodah Zarah Mitzaratzma is not a Pula Nimshachas, but where he was over on Avodah Zarah, in this case, through a Maisa Gneva, that's Nimshach, so the Avodah Zarah is also Nimshach. It's just to point out, so what would happen if someone steals Avodah Zarah? I go to my friend and I steal Avodah Zarah. I'm stealing, which is a Pula Nimshachas, and it's connected to Avodah Zarah. I don't think we're going to say in that case that makes the Chet of Avodah Zarah be a Pula Nimshachas. Even though my stealing, my Aveira, which is a Pula Nimshachas, is connected to Avodah Zarah. Over here, the vart is that the Aveira itself is Avodah Zarah. Lo yidbak biyadcha mu'uma min acherim is Avodah Zarah. And this same Aveira of Lo yidbak biyadcha mu'uma min acherim, he was over on in a way of Geneva, that Geneva is a Pula Nimshachas, so that causes in this case that the Aveira of Avodah Zarah should be a Pula Nimshachas. Now, so what's the one of the main Yesod, second main Yesod, that Geneva, the Isser Geneva is a Pul Nimshachas. The Rebbe brings this from the Rogatchover. It has a Chaymer Meyuchad, that every moment was mekertnet the Geneva Gzela, that you don't return it, is there over afle Signeva. In other words, the simple hasbar over here is, the Isser Geneva is not just the Maisa HaGneva, the act of taking it. Like by other Isurim, someone ate chelav. The Maisa Achila, he finished eating it, Aveira is over. He has to do tshuva always, but he finished doing the Aveira. By Gneva, the Aveira is that I have something that someone else is. Ich halt das up von him. So until he gets it back, I'm continuing to withhold from him what's rightfully his. I'm continuing to do the Aveira. And the Rebbe, I guess, we could say to illustrate this idea, or to bring out this idea that Geneva is a Pul Nimshachas, he brings that der mit is der Rogatchover mevayer, das was der Rambam rechnet die Laven von Leisigzel und Leisignev in dem Klau von Lav shenitten letashlumen und nit in dem Klau von Lav shenittik lasi. With this, that we say Geneva is a Pul Nimshachas, the Rogatchover explains why the Rambam says the reason for not getting Malkus for Geneva and Gzela is not because they are Alav and Nittik L'Aseh, because they are Alav and Nittik L'Tashlumin. By Alav and Nittik L'Aseh is min Evraf and Lav Ner B'Shas Maisa Avera. Ubemela as the Teirat gegebrin anaseh zu menatik zayin und mesaken zayin dem Lav Muzmin Zogin as der Teira, as der Tikkun is Chalem Afrei of der Maisa Avera. Aber bei Gneva Gzela is min Evraf and Lav Kozman art nit batzalt. B'meila b'shas kert is nor a lav shenitin l'tashlumin b'heva. Basically, seemingly, the svara of the Rogatchover is based on a chiddush that also seems to be a chiddush of the Rogatchover. We say lav anitik la'essay ein leikin alav. Whenever the Torah gives an essay after the lav to correct it, you don't get malchus. Says the Rogatchover, what's considered a lav anitik la'essay when the essay undoes the lav completely? When the essay is oiker, it completely removes the lav as if it was never done. But if the essay is something b'neisav after the lav, I could do an essay, but it's not ikr l'mafreya the lav, that's not called a lav anitikla essay. What makes me look at any lav anitikla essay as considering the essay being ikr the lav l'mafreya? Hagufa, that Torah gave, someone does an avera. Torah says something is an avera. And after the avera, Torah gives the person an essay that he can do. Obviously, the essay is being, every avera you have to do tshuva. If the Torah gave an essay to correct it, must be that with that Torah gave an essay, it's giving you a way to be minatik and be misakin and correct and be oiker the lav, that it's as if you never did the lav, right? That's the simple reasoning, seemingly, of the Rogatchover. B'meila, says the Rogatchover, a second step. When do I have this heichacha? From the fact that there's an assay after the lav. That must be this assay is being minatik the lav. When the avera was only a chad pa'ami, was a one-time avera. So what's the assay afterwards doing? All that's left to do now is to uproot the avera. But when there's avera that's a pula nimshachas, so there's two things that are needed to correct the avera. I have to correct the original avera if possible. I have to correct the continuing avera to stop it from continuing. So even though Torah gave an essay, we have no heichacha that essay is being minatik the lav l'mafreya, because maybe all that the essay is doing is stopping the continuation of the avera. So b'meila, when there's a pula nimshachas, the assay that follows the lav, we have no basis to interpret it as being minatik the lav l'mafreya. That seems to be the reasoning of the Rogatchover. And therefore, says the Rogatchover, since Gneva is a pula nimshachas, so even though there's an essay, Gneva and Gzela, even though there's an essay of a Heshev Gzela Asher Gazal, we have no basis to say that it's minatik the lav l'mafreya. It's only maybe the minatik the mikana lahaba, and therefore you can't consider it a lav anitikla essay, because lav anitikla essay by definition has to be that the essay was in gansim minatik the lav, and therefore the Rambam says, why don't you get malchus for gneva and gzela? Because it's a lav anitin l'tashlumin. Okay, that's the pashtup pshat l'cheira and the Rogatchover. So the Rebbe in Ha'ara 37 asks l'cheira a very stark question on the Rogatchover. V'tzarich yin ksas eich masim biyureim mashakasav harambam reish hilchos gzela v'aveda. The Rogatchover is saying that the gneva and gzela is a pul nimshachas is the reason why, according to the Rambam, it's not a lav anitikla essay. L'cheira steht befeirish verkehrt the Rambam. The Rambam says, ein leiken alav zeh sharei akasav nitkila essay zu mitzvus essay. Sagt doch der Rambam, es ist ja lav anitikla essay. Vafilu soraf agzela, ein leike shari yuchayiv l'shalom dameh v'chol lav shenitin l'tashlumin ein leiken alav. So the Rambam says, when is it a lav anitin l'tashlumin? When it's not be'en, when you can't give back the object itself. But kozman it's be'en, it is a lav anitikla essay. The Rogatchover brought what he brought, that the Rambam doesn't consider it a lav anitikla essay from Hilchos Sanhedrin. Says the Rebbe in the Shulei Hagilya, from Hilchos Sanhedrin is no raya. V'leshe Hilchos Sanhedrin lo yichilek harambam b'lav lo yisiglam havi ben elav yishlemer shesamach ha'mashakasa b'Hilchos Gzela v'aveda shelifnei zeh. Once in Hilchos Gzela v'aveda, the Rambam said sometimes it's a lav anitikla essay, sometimes it's a lav anitikla tashlumin. So in Hilchos Sanhedrin, he doesn't have to go into the details. So he says what lav anitikla tashlumin, always it's at least a lav anitikla tashlumin. Because he already said the breakdown in Hilchos Gzela v'aveda, that what is it specifically depends on if it's be'en or not. וזה שגם בפירוש המשנה יש מקס, כסף בחלק השני, לאו שניתנו תשלומים אין ליכן עליו לסיגנה ולסיגזל, ולחילק בזה הם הווי בהן. L'cheira, the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnayos also seems to imply, like the Rogatchover says, that it's a lav shenitin l'tashlumin, and not a lav anitikla essay, because he gives lesignev and lesigzel as an example of lav shenitin l'tashlumin. and he doesn't differentiate if it's be'en or not. Says the Rebbe, that's not a question. He says beferish that someone is over and this lav has to pay money. So he's obviously not talking about where it's ben. Where it's ben, you don't pay tashlumei mamin. Where it's ben, you pay the thing itself. Good, so where it's not ben, that's when the Rambam says, Salava nitil tashlumin. Where it's ben, the Rambam says in Hilchos Gzeilav Aveda, it's a lava nitikla essay. It is a lava nitikla essay. And he doesn't say anywhere otherwise. So seemingly, it's a big question on the whole Yesod of the Rogatchover. The Rogatchover brought one Rambam in Hilchos Sanhedrin, but that Rambam says the Rebbe is basing himself on what he already said in Hilchos Gzeilav Aveda, and there says Beferish Fakert. So what seems to be hard to understand over here is, this seems to be a huge question. Not a question. The whole Yesod of the Rogatchover doesn't seem to be eisgehalten. Das stimmt nicht mit der Rambam, mit der Shittas Rambam. Why is it at Tzarachi and Ksatz, number one? This is at Tzarachi and Ksatz, this is like, looks like the ganze Rogatchover hebt sich nicht an. And more than that, so why does the Rebbe Bechlal bring that vart of the Rogatchover? That's not negiyat l'cheira to the Chiddush in the Sicha. Even if we want to accept that the Rogatchover says that Gneva is a pul and imshachas, nu ken sein Gneva is a pul and imshachas. But that the Rogatchover says it's based on that the Rambam says it's not a lava nitikla essay, that can't be, because the Rambam says it is a lava nitikla essay. So why does the Rebbe bring that part of the Rogatchover in the Pnim? The Rebbe should l'cheira just bring that the Rogatchover says it's a pul and imshachas, and finished. The Rebbe brings also that that's the reason for it not being a lava nitikla essay, when in the Ha'ara the Rebbe seems to show that this is like nitin le'yamer. What's the pshat in that? So, possibly could be understood as follows. The Rebbe says, obviously, the Rogatchover brought the Rambam in Sanhedrin. The Rogatchover wasn't being mis'alem from the Rambam in Hilchos Gzeilav Aveda. The Rogatchover knew the Rambam in Hilchos Gzeilav Aveda says different, and still he brings his raya, and it's still a raya. That is normal b'zayin pieces a raya. That's the Tzarachi and Ksas. I heard a story, Derech Agav, that the Rogatchover once wrote a letter to Rabbi Zevin, and he wrote a pilpul. And the pilpul was in a pasuk. The fact that the pasuk says a certain word with a vav, and the Rogatchover wrote kedarke a whole beer in the gather of the mitzvah based on the fact that Torah says it with a vav. It could have been without a vav. Tilei tilim shalach. So Rabbi Zevin wrote back a letter to the Rogatchover, and he wrote Sefer Katan Yesh Lanu v'chumesh Shmai, and dort steht der Wort on a vav. So the Rogatchover wrote him back that you're right, and he took it back. He made a mistake, and he forgot the way it says. But the reason why he made a mistake is because he knew the pasuk from the Rambam, and the Rambam says it with a vav. Akapanim, so good. So if it was talking about a pasuk, I mean, that's again, I should in the pasuk from the Rambam. In the Rambam, impossible. So what's the pshat in the Rogatchover bringing a raya from Hilchos Sanhedrin? And Kilu ignoring the Rambam in Hilchos Gzeilav Aveda, that befrat that tells us the pshat in Hilchos Sanhedrin, like the Rebbe says, because the Rambam is same on what he said before. So could be the pshat is pashat. Behektim. The Rambam says that when the Gzeila is be'en in Hilchos Gzeilav Aveda, it's a lava nitikles. When the Gzeila is not be'en, so then it's a lava nitin l'tashlumin. It's no longer a lava nitikla. What's the reason for this difference? Again, when it's not be'en. Why when it's not be'en, according to the Rambam, is it a lava nitin l'tashlumin and not a lava nitikla? So the Achreinim say, in the Das Rambam, that the Rambam holds, the Rab Chaim says, that the Rambam holds that the mitzvah of Veheshev Esagzela Asher Gozal, the essay, is talking about only when it's be'en, to give back the chayfetz itself. B'meila, when the chayfetz is not be'en, there's no essay. It's not a lava nitikla essay anymore. Elamai, there's a separate chiyuv of tashlumin that we learn from somewhere else. And therefore the lava nitikla essay could only be when it's be'en. Only then is there the essay, the mitzvah essay of Eishav Esagzela. The other Rishonim, numerous other Rishonim, that hold that when it's not be'en, it's still a lava nitikla essay. They obviously don't hold like this Yesod, and they obviously hold that the Veheshev Esagzela, the mitzvah's essay of Veheshev Esagzela, is even when it's not be'en. But these Achreinim say that's where the Rambam all argues, he holds there's no essay when it's not be'en. Maybe the Rogatchover learns that no, there's no machlekes in Veheshev Esagzela. Even according to the Rambam, Veheshev Esagzela is a mitzvah's essay, whether it's be'en or not. You have a mitzvah's essay of Veheshev Esagzela, like the other Rishonim hold. B'meila, why does the Rambam say when it's not be'en? Why isn't it a lava nitikla essay anymore? That's the question. The Rambam himself says that Gneva and Gzela is a lava nitikla essay when it's be'en. So why in a general case, why when it's not be'en is it not a lava nitikla essay? After bring the Rogatchover Araya, it must be because Gneva and Gzela da Avera is a pula nimshachas. And if it's a pula nimshachas, so then even though there's an assay of Veheshev Esagzela shegazal, you have no indication that it's minatik the lav l'mafreya. And b'meila, since it's a pula nimshachas, it's a lava nitin l'tashlumen. So why when it's be'en? Why when it's be'en is it a lava nitikla essay? When it's be'en, it's for sure a pula nimshachas. Because shekain, it's a pula nimshachas. Yeah, that would still be the tzarachi inktas still. So that could be two possibilities. One possibility is this whole vart, Torah gives a lav, and Torah gives an essay. To make it a lava nitikla essay, we have to say that the fact that Torah gave an essay, obviously Torah is using that essay to be minatik, to be me'ikir the lav. In order to say that, we have to have a hechrech, in was besteht the essay. Masha'enkin, therefore, says the Rogatchover, if it's a pula nimshachas, hast du nicht kein hechrech, you don't have a proof from the fact that there's an essay that it's coming to be minatik the lav, because maybe it's coming to stop the continuity of the Vera, the mikanal above the Vera. That's all when it's not be'ein, or by other Averas, where the assay isn't be'etzem reversing the lav, just as a separate essay, and therefore the reason why we say it's minatik is because of the hechrech misvara kilo, eibnish vas is the essay, and therefore it's a pula nimshachas has to nish the hechrech. Mashekin by Veheshev Esagzela, where it's be'en, where the assay is reversing the lav b'peil, because that same object that was nigzal now went back. So there we say misvara it's minatik the lav. Not only because eibnish vas is the assay, because that's the definition of the assay. And since that's the definition of the assay, there we don't need the hecher. So even though it's a pula nimshachas, nevertheless, now where the assay is being miskayim through giving back the very object that you stole, zag ich ja, hast du minatik given the lav in ganzen. Mashenkin, where the assay is something separate, it's tashlumin for the lav. So why am I going to define it as a nitikla essay, as something that's eker lav l'mafreya? Because if nicht in was besteht the essay, so there I'll have the svar of the Rogatchover. But if it's a pula nimshachas, you don't have that hechrech, and therefore it has to be a lav nitin l'tashlumin. That's one possibility. It could be misvara, yeah. So the whole raya of the Rogatchover is taken from when it's not be'en. That when it's not be'en is a chiddush of the Rambam that it's lav nitin l'tashlumin, and he doesn't accept the hasbara of all the other achreinim that the lav of Veheshev Esagzela is only when it's be'en. And b'meila the raya is from when it's not be'en that it's a pula nimshachas, and be'emes it's a pula nimshachas even when it's be'en. But when it's be'en, I say misvara, it has the regular gather of a lav nitikla. Another possible explanation for this if this general mahalach in the beer and the Rogatchover is correct. We just have the tzarichin ksas, like, so how do we explain when it's be'en? We could understand it based on what the Rebbe says b'mokim acher. Divrei Torah aniyim b'mokim echad, v'ashirim b'mokim acher. There's another sicha in Chelek Lamed Beis and Parshas Kedoshim, and over there the Rebbe speaks about kol hagezel as chaveirei shave pruta kilu neitel nafshe himenu, and the Rebbe explains this geder in gzela. Why gzela is neitel nafshe? The etzem fact that I undermine his balabatishkeit, I disregard his balabatishkeit, is a inyan of netilas neshama of neitel nafshe. And in the hemshech of the sicha, so the Rebbe explains in Sivav the tnoim of takanas hashavim based on this, and why there's certain times when we don't say takanas hashavim, and one of them is when the gzela is be'en, when the actual gzela is still in existence, and you don't have the takana of takanas hashavim. Says the Rebbe, Tamadavar, hashavas hagzela atzma bekoicha l'saken es ha'ovin me'ikrei. When you return the gzela itself, you're uprooting the aveira lemafreya. Masha enkein keshemishalim damim v'loy heishev hagzela arei u'mesaken rak hefsed hamamin shal hanigzal v'loy yeskuf aveira. When you pay money, you're undoing the damage, but you're not reversing the aveira itself. And the Rebbe brings in the brackets that when it's be'en, it's a lavanitik la'aseh. When it's not be'en, it's a lavanitik l'tashlumin. And he says this vart. He brings the Rogatchover. Lavanitik la'aseh means it's l'mafreya. So that means when you're giving back the gzela itself, you're misaking the lav l'mafreya. And with that, the Rebbe explains, therefore, when the gzela is kayemes and you're able to undo the neitel nafshe mimena, which was the aveira itself, so for sure you have to take any opportunity to do that and not put in a takanas hashavim in the way of that, except for an extreme case like he brings in the Hemshech of Dais. So in Hara 47 in that sicha, the Rebbe brings B'tzofnas paneach sham mevar de begzelo gneva eina misaknim halav lemafreya kivan da have davar hanimshach shegzela have pula nimshachas. Brings the Rogatchover. This is the same Rogatchover, that since gzela and gneva is a pula nimshachas, so you're not misakim lemafreya. V'ula yesh leima shezeu rak b'negei lechisarin momin shel hasheni. Avalei b'negei laha'inyan de ki'ilu neitel nishmasei mimenu shipula chad pa'amis b'maisa halakicha ba'karchi shel ha'bailim shezeh efshel l'sakin k'shemachzer gam ha'chifetz. And the Rebbe finishes off with Vadayim Tzarechiyim. So the Rebbe says, seemingly the Vart says over there, in Gzela there's two inyanim. There's the hefsid mumming that I'm doing to him, and there's the neitel nafshe himenu. The pu'ula nimshaches is the loss of money. As long as he doesn't get back his possessions, the chayfetz or the money, it's a constant loss. I'm constantly withholding from him what's his. But the neitel nishmasei mimenu, that the act of gzela undermines his whole authority, that's the maisa gzela. That's something that finished with the conclusion of the maisa gzela. Says the Rebbe, therefore, comes out that there's an aspect of gzela that's a pula nimshachas, and there's an aspect of gzela the bein adam lachave the hezek gufei ki'ilu the neitel nafshe mimenu. That's a pula chad pa'amit. That's a one time. That's not a pula nimshachas. With that you say it, and the Rebbe is saying over there v'kitzer this vart to explain why when it's be'en you could be eker l'mafreya. And let's just take it, apply it to our sicha perhaps, that this is the vart, that since by gzela there's also the neitel nafshe mimenu, which is chad pa'amis, the whole vart of lava nitik la'aseh, we said, that you can't conclude from the essay that the lav was nistakin lemafreya, is because if it's a pula nimshachas, then all I could see from the essay is that the essay is stopping the pula nimshachas. kannst du nicht sehen von dem, was da essay, that it's being mesaken lemafreya. By Gzela, there's also a pula chad pa'amis. So the essay benegia to the pula chad pa'amis, benegia to the one-time aveir of kilu netal nafshe mimenu, is being accurate lemafreya. Maybe we could say, therefore, Avada the Ragit Shaver says, by Gzela, it's a lava nitn l'tashlumen. It's not a lava nitik essay, because since it's a pula nimshachas, you can't say that it's working lemafreya. Why does the Rambam say that when it's be'en, it's a lava nitik l'essay? Because when it's be'en, there's an aspect of the Geneva that's a pula chad pa'amis, the netal nafshi. V'ula yesh leimar, that's a inyan ikri. That when you have the netal nafshi, the momentalistic hazik is secondary to that. And therefore, when that's nistaken lemafreya, then since that's the main thing compared to the moment when that's being affected, if I'm being misaken that lemafreya, so then automatically we're going to say also that the avera, every part of the avera, that's ki'ilu ha'staifus is mistaken lemafreya. And therefore, that's another way we could understand the Ragachavar, even according to this hasbara, that avada his raya is from when it's not be'en. Why does the Rambam say it's a lava nitik l'tashlum and not a lava nitik l'esrei? Because it's a pul nimshachas. When it's be'en, it's also a pul nimshachas. When it's be'en, there's an aspect of the avera that's not a pul nimshachas. And since that aspect is a inyan ikri, so therefore the whole avera is considered a lava nitik l'esrei. This is b'derech efsher, two ways to explain the Ragat Shavar, based on one general way of explaining that the raya of the Ragat Shavar is takeh from when it's not be'en, even though avada and hilchas gzeil of aveda when it's be'en, the Rambam says different, and two possible ways to explain why when it's be'en it's different and it's a lava nitik l'aseh. And there could be other ways, but that's why it's a tzarech yinktas. Avada, it doesn't affect the general raya, and that's why the general yisaid that the Ragat Shavar explains the difference between lava nitik tashlumin and lava nitik l'aseh by gzeila the Rebbe brings, because we still need it for when it's not be'en. Now, the Rebbe goes on in Siv Zayin. Pisa is verstandig. Der Chiddush beniden didan, that since Gneva is a pula nimshachas and he's over on Loisegnevu, as long as he has this Gneva, and when the Loisegnevu was with the Cherem of Iranidacha, so it comes out that when through Ganvi is nimshach dirishas from pula sagneva, and that causes a pula nimshachas of Avodah Zarah and Charein Av Ba'elam. The whole word the Rebbe is using this for is to explain the mashmas of the Mishnah that calls man sharishoim ba'elam, chareinav ba'elam, even though the chefts of the Avodah Zarah may have already been destroyed. So in Ha'ara 38, the next Ha'ara, the Rebbe asks a question on this. B'tzafnas paneach shamashma. The zeva the havipulin imshachas who benidin shagzela v'agneva haviben. The Ragat Shavar is mashma, and the words of the Ragat Shavar be'emsa dibur, he says kivan shahagzela be'en. Is mashma that the pu'ulan imshachas is when it's be'en. Now, the question is a question on the beer in the Sicha. Because the Rebbe is using the word of the Ragat Shavar to farem for the mashmos of the Mishnah that calls man sharasham be'elam chareinav be'elam, even though the cherem itself, the chefs of the Avodah Zarah is not banned. According to what I explained in the previous Ha'ara, it's a question on the whole raya of the Ragat Shavar, because the whole raya has been a gear to lav shnishnet l'tashluma when it's not banned. Regardless, so the Rebbe says aval yesh leiman. Shazer rak legabe hachefs hanigzal chulu the geizlei bechol shah aval legabe hagavra she'ever al isr gzelo gneva hu davar hanimshach gamim loy have be'ein kol man shalei shilim. Says legabe the hefts the object that was stolen, it's a pula nimshachas only when the object is be'en. Legabe the person's avera, it's a pula nimsheches always. What's the pshat in this chiluk? One possibility we would be able to say is based on what the Rebbe explains in another Sicha, in Chelek Lamed Dalet in Parshas Ekev. Very Yisayistic Vart the Rebbe says over there. The Rebbe is speaking about the Shviras Haluches. And the Rebbe brings over there is a difference between Gzela and Mazik, Benegeya to causing damage, to stealing or being Mazik someone, in a way that the Nizik or the Nigzal is going to end up gaining more money from it. So the Rebbe differentiates, says a very Yisayistic Vart, he differentiates between Mazik and Gzela. That Mazik, if I'm being Mazik him and he's going to be richer through the Hezek, so it's not called a hezek. Because mazik means I'm causing the person a loss. The din of hezek is defined as the loss to the person. If he's not losing money, he's becoming richer because of the fact that his object is damaged, so I didn't do anything to him. It doesn't matter what happened to the object. Right? And there's many cases in Achreinim that are nafkaminas in this. Gneva, however, says the Rebbe in that Sicha, is to the chayfetz. The Lashon is... One second. The Lashon, the Rebbe says, therefore, Gneva, you can't do, even if it's Almanas L'Shalom Kefel, even if he's going to earn more. Says because Gneva has baras adavar, yeah, it's an ice gimel. Says Masha'enkin iser Gneva v'gzelu bazeh shenoito chayfetz mirshus chaveirei umachnisei l'shusei ve'ein adavar toli b'shavyas hachayfetz ela be'etzem habaylos shel chaveirei. The iser Gneva is measured by the object, taking an object that's under my friend's bailos and taking it away. That's the Maisa Gneva. It's not because of his loss, it's because of the Chayfa, it's because of my Maisa. And that's why he brings in the Ara, the Isser Gneva is even by Kolsho, even something that has no Shavyas. Yeah, and like the Rebbe brought earlier in this Sikha, the Shakal V'Tari B'Negei Tisurei Hana. Kapanim, so since the Isser Gneva is defined by the Maisa with the Chayfet, it's not defined by the person's loss. It's by taking an object of someone else's bailos and removing it from his bailos. It's what I'm doing to the chayfetz. Therefore, you will be able to say, as soon as the chayfetz is not around anymore, there's no Maisa Gneva anymore. Elamai, the person, there's still a separate thing that I'm still causing him a loss. So it's kilo, I have an Aveira, but I don't have the Maisa Hagneva. That's what we would be able to say is the Hasbara of this Chiluk. But in the Hemshech of the Sikha, the Rebbe says that the Maisa HaAveira, the Maisa HaAveira is a Pulanim Shechas Begneva. Not just the Aveira of the person. So seemingly once I did an Aveira, I did a Maisa Gneva with an object, so then until I correct it, that's still a Pulanim Shechas of the Maisa Hagneva, even when the object is not around anymore. So what's the pshat then in this chiluk, that there's the Pulanim Shechas B'Negei to the Chefza and the Pulanim Shechas B'Negei to the Gavra. So l'chayra, the difference is, or one possible way of understanding it, al kapanim, is behektim. This Indian that Gneva is a Pulanim Shechas, the Rebbe brings over here from the, what's the difference? What is that? What is the change that it's a Pulanim Shechas? Now the Rebbe brings over here the difference that it's a Pulanim Shechas is an Afkemina legabe lavanitik lasi. There's another Nafkamina that the Rogat Shavar speaks about, and by the Farbrengen, the Yud Shvat, when the Rebbe made this Hadran, so the Rebbe mentioned very bekitzer that nafkamina. The Rebbe said there's a nafkamina le'inyan, the amount that you pay when it's yukra, when the price goes up and down, referring to this other nafkamina that the Rogat Shavar said. I'm not sure why it didn't go into the Mugad de Kesicha, but the Rebbe spoke about that nafkamina, and that nafkamina helps us understand this Yisoidus de Kesfara, the concept of Pul Nimshachas also. So just bekitzer, there's a Gemara in Baba Kama and Daf Samachei in Miruba, Amar Rav, Keren, Ke'en Sheganav, Tashlume Kefel v'Tashlume Arba v'Chamisha Kishas Amad Bedin. Someone steals something and the price fluctuates, the price changes, and the Gemara says it depends. There's a bunch of different cases when it doesn't apply, but whatever case it applies, and the price changes, so the Keren you pay. So if you stole something, you have to pay Keren, you have to pay Kefal, and if you was Tavach u'Mocher, you have to pay also Dal V'Hei. The Keren you pay Kein Sheganav. And the reason why you pay Keren Kein Sheganav is Gzeirus HaKasav, Neimam Matera Chayim B'Gneva Achil Keren Kein Sheganav. It's Gzeirus HaKasav that the Pasuk makes Keren Kein Sheganav. Kefal Dal V'Hei is not Gzeirus HaKasav. So it's a Svara. What's the Svara? Says the Rogachover in one of the three places that the Rebbe brings down, and it's also in the Mefanech Tzfunas brings down. Says the Rogachover, the Svara of Rav is because if I would say Geneva is a one-time Avera, that when I stole it, now it's finished. So even if you would say that when I don't give it back, I'm continuing to withhold it, I'm doing a new Geneva, I wouldn't have any chiyuv for that new Geneva, because it's like Genev Achra Ganav. That's what the Rogachover says there. It's finished, you can't steal it anymore. So my chiyuv could only be based on the original Maisa Geneva. B'meila, the Kefal and the Dal V'Hei would have to be Ke'en Sheganav, based on the price it was when I stole it. Mashenkein, if it's a Pula Nimshachas, that means I stole it and I never finished stealing it. I'm continuing to steal it. And therefore, what am I going to pay for when I finish stealing it? Kishas Hamad B'Din, what's the amount that I have to pay back? For the amount that I pay back is based on the value when my Maisa Gneva was completed, when it's the Shas Hamad B'Din, then is understood Kefal and Dal V'Hei is Kishas Hamad B'Din. So it comes out that this Gneva is a Pulanim Shachas, makes a big nafkamina la'alacha in evaluating the amounts of my tashlumin for the Gneva. Yeah, again, that's what the Rogachover says over there, and that's what the Rebbe said by the Sicha, but by the Fabrin. So in this could be the nafkamina in this ha'ara. When could I say that it's a pula? When could I say that the pula nimshachas is a reason to pay shas hamad b'din? Obviously, that's only when the chayfetz is still around. When the chayfetz is around, so then I'm stealing a chayfetz that's more valuable. And therefore, what's the final amount that I have to pay? What's the final measurement we use to evaluate the amount of my kefal v'dal v'hei? The worth of the chayfetz b'shas hamad b'din. So that's what the Rebbe says in the Ara. When it's be'ein, then it's a pula nimshachas b'negia to the chayfetz, that I'm continuing to do the ma'aseh gneva with this chayfetz. As soon as the chayfetz is not be'ein, so there can't be any more a pula nimshachas b'negia to the chayfetz. And again, you can make enough kamina la'alacha. So now I can't anymore pay tashlumin of anything later than the time when it's not be'elim anymore, because I'm not stealing the chayfetz anymore. I'm still stealing money from the bailim. That the money that I have to restore to him, I'm constantly not paying. There's a pool in nimshachas, and again that's going to get to my ma'isa avera, because I'm continuing to steal from the bailim. But the stealing is no longer that I'm stealing the chayfetz because the chayfetz is not here. And like I say, it's a very big nafkamina, that the outcome of the fact that it's a pula nimshachas b'negeya to paying the tashlumin according to the shas hamad b'din, that's kamin shemer nishzagin, because now the pula nimshachas is only b'negeya to the ma'isa aveira of the person. That's could be the pshat b'negeya to this ha'ara. One more ha'ara in the Sicha. In Sif Yud, the Rebbe says, still the Yukim questions, why does he say Ganvi and not Gazelni? If we're trying to find a hechetimtza of an avera that's a pulin imshachetz that's connected with the avodah zarah, with the lo yidbak b'yadchem u'min acherem, so that's there whether it was done in a way of gneva or gzela, they're both pulin imshachetz. And why dafke charein does the Brisa say? Why does other averas have charein? And in Sichos the Rabbi brings the Gemara Shalu Talmidav Es Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, and it brings the Chumrah of Gneva, that every Avera of Gneva is Isa Asa Ayin Shalmata Kilo Ein Reya Va'izin Shalmata Kilo Ein Shemas. And the Rabbi says on that Dias Boras Moisef Tam and then was Rabbi Yosef Emfretas mit Rishayim was bringing Charein Af meint the Mishnah Ganvi. Stam, nicht der Mann der Kaseret sich wegen Cherem, warum der Etzem Achet von Gneva ist kein Avodah Zarah. Ich der Ganev halt kilu ozev avaya sarat vein avaya reya. So the etzem avera of Gneva seemingly brings charein af for the same reason that avodah zarah brings charein af, just like the avera of avodah zarah is like the declaration that ozev avaya sarat, so too that's what's expressed in the action of every Ganev. And that's why dafke ganvi and not gazli, and in a more dakostic way, that's there by all Averas, that's the word of the Brisa. It seems hard to understand. So, how does this fit with the whole beer? The whole Sicha seemed to be based on the Yesod that if the Aveira of Yidbak B'yadchem U'min Acherim is an Aveira of Avodah Zarah, B'meila brings charein af ba'elam, and if the hechetimsa, if the oifen that I was over that avera was through an avera that's a pulin imshachas like never gzela, so then the charein af is going to be in a way of pulin imshachas kozman sharasham ba'elam charein af ba'elam. Now seems to be a whole new hasbara that the ganvi itself is every maisa gneva is a pulin imshachas in the inyan of avodah zarah. So does that mean Rabbi Yosef is talking about every Ganev, even if it's not below Yidbak B'yadchem U'min Acherem? It could be. But still, why doesn't it say Gazlani? Saf kol saf, we weren't doiche in any way the hasbara until now in the Sicha. So mitzad the reason in the first part of the Sicha, a Gazlan of Yidbak B'yadchem U'min Acherem should still be a way of having Pulinim Shachas in the Avera of Yidbak B'yadchem U'min Acherem. How are we answering that? We seem to be saying a totally new hasbara. So it's possible, not probable, but maybe you'll say di hasbara in Sif Yud is Ki'ilu, the Rebbe is saying another beer, Be'efen Acher. There's one beer, but that beer doesn't for these three diyukim in the end. There's further diyukim for. And therefore the Rebbe says another pshat in the Gemara, and that it's referring to Ganvi Bechlal, and it's mitzad the Aveira of Gneva, mitzad the Chomer that Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai says about the Aveira of Gneva, and that answers all the diyukim, and that answers why it doesn't say Gzela. And according to that, Ganvi is a general inyan of Ganvi, and like the Rebbe says, Ganvi stam nider manen dik asiretzach wegen Cherem. I don't think it's mashma like that. It's mashma that it's a hemshech and it's an addition to everything that it said until now. But maybe someone will tie to that. I don't know. I mean, have to maybe we'll go back and look at the it's part of the Fabrenim. But that's one possibility, and that would answer because it sounds like a separate hasbara that's not connected with the earlier hasbara. The other way to understand this sif that I could think of, that seems to be more mistaber to Lanias Daiti, is the Rebbe is adding another vart. There's a chiddush in the Sikha. The chiddush is that lo yidbak b'yadchem u'min acherim is avodah zarah. Ganvi is a pulanim shachas. If the eifen that the person was over and lo yidbak b'yadchem u'min acherim was through the avera of Gneva, that Gneva is a pulanim shachas, so then his avera of lo yidbak b'yadchem u'min acherim will also be a pulanim shachas. Even though the Pula Nimshachas is mitzad the Geneva Shaba, but the Layidbak B'yadchem U'min Acherim will be Nimshach, the Avodah Zarah will be Ba'ilam, Kolzman, that the Layidbak B'yadchem, Kolzman the Ganvi is Nimshach, and therefore Kolzman Shasham Ba'ilam Charein Af Ba'ilam. And maybe to this the Rebbe is adding, Kosov, that's a Chiddush. Because they're two separate things. Through your over on the Layidbak B'yadcha Be'uma Min Acherim through a Maisa Geneva, but it's the Geneva that's Nimshach. The Layidbak B'yadcha Be'uma Min Acherim theoretically doesn't have to be Nimshach, like the Rebbe brings it, could be through Hana, through having Hana from the Geneva, through having Hana from the Cherem without any Geneva. So, that I happen to do it through Geneva is a Chiddush to say that because of that, the Avodah Zarah will acquire the characteristics of the Geneva and become a Pula Nimshachas. And maybe therefore the Rebbe in Eis Yud is being Meisif a Teisves Hasbara. And just without getting into it, there's a Sicha in Chelek Yud Aleph Parshas Yisrael, I think, by Chasma B'Koil. And the Rebbe speaks over there a whole Yisrael, very beautiful Sicha, that for two things to be connected, there has to be a shaykhis between them. For a dibur of a adam to be considered the goyrem of a maisa, and to make that bedibure avid maisa should make it a lav sheish by maisa, there has to be some connection between them. Two things that are not connected can't become in halacha connected. That's the you say, but al derech zeh is binyaneinu. Maybe the Rebbe adds to that. Gneva is Gneva. Layidbak b'yadchem u'menachem. Why are we able to connect them and say that just because he was over on the Layidbak b'yadchem u'menachem through a Maisa Gneva, which is a Pula Nimshachas because of the Gdarim of Gneva, does the Layidbak b'yadchem u'menachem become Nimshach? Because Gneva itself has in it a certain dakostik inyan of Avodah Zarah. The fact that Gneva is also Eisen Shalmata and Ayin Shalmata Kilo Ein Reya. And B'meila, this is all a Tosfos. This is a added Hasafas Hasbara on what was said until now. This is just the reason why this Hasbara that we said until now, that Omer Rabbi Yosef Ganvi is enough to make that Avodah Zarah should get the Gedarim of a Pula Nimshachas and should make the Chareinav continue to be Bailam. And therefore we chap on Ganvi and not Gazlani. And therefore that Dakos Tiki Inyan is there by other Averas, but obviously by other Averas it's Bechlal not the same, not in the same Eifin. And that's why Rabbi Yosef says the Rebbe chaps on Gamvi Stam and not Layidbak B'yadchem u'menachem, because he's bringing out how the Geneva itself has in it a characteristic of Avodah Zarah, and therefore when you did the Layidbak B'yadchem u'menachem through Geneva, then the Layidbak B'yadchem u'menachem becomes one with Avodah of Geneva and becomes a Pula Nimshachas. Yeah, it doesn't say this befedish over here, but maybe that's the pshat. Maybe that's the beer of this whole Sif Yud. And then I would be able to understand how it's a hemshech. It's not a new hasbara. And behemshech to what was explained until now in the Sicha. And despite that, still, if it was through Gzeila, Valtich das nicht gesagt, and therefore Rabbi Yosef Chapsan Dafke Ganvi. And whoever has a better hasbara, Adir Rabbi Tovi Olav Brach.